Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about what GitHub is, what the difference is between GitHub and Git, and what you should be using it for. So I hope you enjoy it.
If we could get into the GitHub and what that's about, that would be great.
Okay. Great question, and I think it makes a lot of sense to try to clear the area here because you're going to be using Git and GitHub, for a long time. Probably for as long as you're in software development.
Right.
So there are a couple of concepts that we need to clear before everything is. Let's start with Git, then we can discuss GitHub. But the same.
Okay.
So the first thing you need to know is Git is versioning control system.
So what is version control?
Oh, okay. I'm glad you asked because that's exactly what I was going for.
Okay.
So here's the deal. Let's say you're working on a project. Let's put I'm going to explain the problem first, and I think it's going to be self-explanatory. But let's say you and I, let's go like this. Let's say you and I both are working on the same project at the same time. Okay?
All right.
So let's say we're a team, and you have to do some feature, and I have to create another feature. Okay? So if we are working on the same code base, which means we are inputting code in the same files, sometimes you have one file and I have a separate file, code file,
right.
I mean. But sometime, down the line, we are going to have to, both edit the same file at the same time.
I see.
That is going to happen. Okay, so now let me back up for a bit. Let's say that doesn't happen. It's you have your file and I have my file.
All right.
Okay, but then sometime we're going to have to put both our files together in order to deploy this to a server or make a package. And okay, so that brings one piece of extra complexity to the administration. Okay, it's like how can we get in sync?
All right.
Okay, so it's like one of us is going to have to take the role of not only code but also to gather the code of the rest of the team.
All right, I see.
Okay, and that is a very simple scenario where we're just two people working on the code. But if you get, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 more people working on the same code, things get really complicated. Okay, so we could do something, and this is based on a real experience I had one time, a long time ago. We could define some sort of policy like, okay, by the end of the day, you have to send me, or I have to send you an email with all my updated files. And it's your job to take them off the email, put them all together, and you are kind of like the guardian of the code. Okay, so that's what you would do if you weren't working with a version control system.
If I wasn't?
If you weren't, exactly. That's exactly this is why version control systems were invented in the first place.
Okay.
In order to overcome these problems. And the problem is, what happens if I if I mess up? Let's say I edited 3 files, but I only sent you 2 files.
Then you would have to send. I'm not sure what
happens. Exactly. The problem is if neither one of us realizes that there's another file that got lost somewhere, it's lost forever. Okay, and that can be really hard thing to. So the point is, it's very hard to keep track of all the changes to a code base. And the more people in the team, the complexity rises. I don't know if exponentially, but it tends to become really hard to keep track of. So that's where versioning systems come to play. The idea is to have like someone else, or actually not exactly someone, but something else take care of all this complexity for you. Okay.
All right.
So basically what we would do is neither one of us would be responsible for keeping track of how the code is, at what point it is, but rather we would have a third party that would be the version control system, which would have this history for us to, to keep track of everything.
Okay, so that's what Git does for us.
That's what Git does for us. And another thing that's very, very important is the version control system also keeps track of, keeps a record of all the history of the code. So let's say you were to create some new version of the code, and you're like, I don't know, maybe 5 hours coding, your head down to the keyboard, and you're coding away, and then you realize it was wrong. Okay, and you say, well, how many Control Z would you have to do to take your work back 5 hours?
Okay.
It's impossible. And how would you know when you have to stop undoing?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. Okay. So that's another advantage of version control systems. Is every time the way you work with the version control system is every time you make a change that kind of makes sense to you, you will do what is called a commit.
A comment?
A commit.
Okay.
And then that's like marking, like, okay, this is a point in the code where if everything goes wrong, I want to be able to get back to here.
And that's a public, like a public change. Your entire team will be able to see that.
Not necessarily. That's a separate issue. But let's go step by step. Okay. So the first thing you need to understand is what is a commit, and a commit is a point in the history of the code where you think you might want to get back to eventually.
All right.
Okay.
And do you make these yourself? The comments? Or does it automatically?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't do it automatically. You have to explicitly make a comment every now and then. It's not like a autosave or anything like that.
All right.
Okay. So every time you make a change and you think, okay, this looks good, then you issue a commit.
All right.
Okay. Right. So that's basically what a version control system does for you. And there's another thing that is very important, and that's the scenario where we are both working on the same file.
All right.
Okay, that can happen. I mean, it happens all the time, actually. And the thing is, if we weren't working with a version control system, you would have to manually merge the files.
And that would be extremely difficult to do that.
That would be absolutely insane.
Okay.
That would be complete insanity, because it's no, it's way out of human possibilities. And so, I mean, one way of kind of solving this problem would be to not allow two people to be working on the same file at the same time, ever.
All right, and so before Git, how exactly did people?
Well, it was a real pain. But one thing you need to know is that Git was not, by far, the first version control system.
All right.
Okay. Git is somewhat new, and I mean new. It has maybe 10 or 15 years. I don't know, but it's relatively new. The thing is, it kind of got very popular in the last few years. Probably mostly because of GitHub and some other platforms like that. But one thing that, for instance, before I used Git, I was using SVN. I mean, at first I was using nothing, and it was all this craziness I was telling you. It was mad. It was completely madness. Yeah, it was impossible. I honestly don't know how we could work like that, but. Anyway, when you don't know, you don't know. So you do the best you know.
Right.
So then I went to work with a system that was called is called actually, it's still around. It's called Subversion or SVN. Perhaps you heard of it. And
I haven't heard of that one.
okay, no problem. It's nowadays it's like Git is like the de facto standard, but it's there are many others similar systems out there.
All right.
And the thing that has SVN is a very simple version control system, and what it has is it's well. Let me go to the very concept of the repository. The idea of the repository is it's like let's say, what is a repository anyway? It's a central location where you have code.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's say again, if we were both working on the same project, each of us would have their own copy, their own local copy of the code. You know, like one copy would be in your computer, one copy would be in my computer, but there would be a third party, an independent, which would have the real version.
And that's what the repository is.
Exactly, that's what the repository is.
Right.
So in SVN, you have a central repository, and everyone can make commits and check out. It's like getting updates from the repository. But the repository is one and only, and it's in a central location. All right, and this is a very important thing, because in the difference with Git is a more nuanced or maybe a little more complex model where there is not necessarily one particular central repository.
So there's what do you mean by that exactly?
Okay, what I mean, it's kind of complex, but the idea is that let's see, when you have a centralized version control system, you have like a hierarchy of repositories. Okay, it's like there is the good almighty repository, it's central, and you have a copy, and everyone gets changes from the repository and put their changes back into the repository. Okay, it's like we wouldn't really have any communication, any direct communication between us. We will go through the central repository in order to communicate with each other. Okay, in a GitHub, in a Git scenario, I mean, Git is called a distributed version control system, which means that there is no need for a third party. It's like each one of us has their own repository, and we can share code directly between us if we wanted to do that.
So we could do that, and there isn't just one. There's multiple ones.
Exactly. There is technically one repository per developer. All right. Okay. In reality, that is usually not very practical. I mean, what people will do is they will each have their repository because that's the way it works. But they will still have one external third party which holds the truth. Okay, so it in a way it's a technicality. This distributed thing. You will probably not use that feature for a long time, if ever. But that's the way it works. And then here's where GitHub comes to play. And it's GitHub. It's a website. It's a company. I think nowadays it's a part of Microsoft. But anyway, it's like it's an organization which allows you to host your project within their servers.
All right. I see.
Okay. And what they have is they use Git as their system. Okay. So what you will do is you will take a copy of let's say you create a new project. Okay. You start working on a project, and down the line you decide that you want me to collaborate with you. Okay. So what you will do is you will create a repository, probably in GitHub or something similar to that, And what you will do is you will upload your code to the GitHub, okay, and have your local version connected to the GitHub repository.
All right.
Okay, and when I say connected is what you will do is you will make your commits, or I mean, once you will do your changes to the code and everything, and you will commit every now and then, I don't know, every half an hour, let's say. Okay, and what you will do is at the end of the day, you will get all of your local changes and push them into the server.
Which is the server, meaning what GitHub holds for?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Okay. And so eventually you will say, okay, you will bring me in and I will create a copy of your repository in my local computer. Okay. I will be working on the code and making comments all the time. And let's say again, at the end of the day, I will push my comment, my whole change set, I will push it to GitHub and I will pull your changes into my own repository.
So when you say pull it into your repository, do you mean so it's going to modify your own and then?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
It's going to it's like what will happen is your changes will be like reproduced in my own repository. It's like you were coding straight in my computer.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, and the same goes for you. Every now and then you will kind of get in sync with a remote repository, which is GitHub. Okay, and when that happens, several things can happen then. In the happy path is nothing, there is no problem, and all the files get merged automatically because that's a scenario where maybe you change the file and I change a different file, for instance. Let's say that was the change. You were all day working on file A and I was all day working on file B.
Right.
Once we need to get in sync, it's kind of there's not much to do. It's simply, okay, bring your changes here and take my changes, and that's it.
All right.
But here's where we both were working on the same file at the same time. Okay. In that case, what Git will try to do is simply merge the changes. If the changes are not applied to the exact same portion of the code, then it will work right off. But sometimes it will say, I don't know how to deal with this because the changes are in conflict.
So what happens, what happens in that case?
Well, what happens is you need to make a call. Git will tell you, okay, so I have these possibilities. These two versions of the code are conflicting with each other. It's like if I take this, I will probably lose changes from this, and vice versa. Okay.
So then it's up. Oh, go ahead.
It's up to you to make the decision.
Oh, all right. I see.
And that's not always easy to know how to fix these conflicts, but you have to make a choice. And the choice can be to either select either side, say I take your changes and sacrifice my own because supposedly I know what I'm doing, and I think your changes make more sense than mine. So that's what I will do. Or I can manually merge, like take some of your code and some of my code, and with that build the last version.
So, okay, so you would have to pick some of the code that I have, and then you would mix it with your code in some way.
Right.
Oh, okay. I see.
So that's the very basic operations. It's like once you've done the merge, then you will make a comment of the new version of the code, the integrated code. Okay, and eventually push it back to the server for all the rest of the team to get updated.
Oh, all right. Well, that sounds it doesn't sound too complex. You know?
Well, it has its complexity. Particularly, Git is a system that is not very user friendly, at least at first. It's well, from my point of view, its terminology it's kind of confusing at first, particularly. But you will get used to it. There is plenty of help out there, and even though Git can be extremely complex, 80% of the time you will be using the same commands. So it's like there is a lot of added complexity that you can, of course, leverage, but it's not mandatory.
All right.
It's like,
okay.
What I mean is, if you get comfortable with 2 or 3 commands, you'll be just fine.
All right. And when you say when you get comfortable with 2 or 3 comments, do you by that do you mean oh, okay. So I see what you're saying. You're saying I might only need to add a couple comments into my code. Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's like you will use git clone, git commit, git push, pull. Pretty much that's the basics of it.
This video you just saw was part of a conversation I had with a student of mine through my mentorship program. So if you have questions like this, you can send me an email and we can discuss the way I can help you. Hope to see you soon. Bye.